Welcome, everybody, into this episode of the Brickyard podcast, going over all the latest conference finals news, talking about Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, everybody else. Also going over the NFL schedules today, so you're not going to want to miss it. Going over everything and more. But here we are, two teams 3-0 in the conference finals. Did you expect to see it play out the way it has to this point?
Yeah, I didn't really expect to see it play out before the series started. However, after watching both of those game ones, with seeing the Mavericks shoot terribly from three, have a pretty bad field goal percentage throughout that game, and then come back and win, I was like, oh, this may be a sweep after how bad that they shot from three. And then likewise with the Celtics, I was like, the Celtics almost blew a game. Then Jaylen Brown hits the three to send it into overtime, and they end up winning that game. Jason Tatum ices it in overtime. And then likewise with that series, it was like the Celtics may sweep them or at least beat them in 5 again in this series. So before they started, I was like, 6 games for the Celtics and Pacers, maybe 7 for the Timberwolves. But after that first game when Dallas was in Minnesota, I was like, oh, this actually might be a sweep.
Yeah, and honestly, at this point, the tandem with Luka and Kyrie has been absolutely electric. You saw Luka's big game-winning shot in Game 2, one of the nastiest game winners in recent memory. And for me, the downside is that the Timberwolves, with how good they played against the Suns and Nuggets, I feel like in this series, Anthony Edwards has not been that same player. I don't know if he's tired or whatever it might be, but they seem to take a step back. Rudy Gobert is back to Rudy Gobert himself. And I've been kind of disappointed from what I've seen from the Timberwolves. Now, as for the Pacers, Halliburton going down in Game 3 obviously gave the advantage to the Celtics. And Celtics, we were thinking 6 games because of how they've played the last 2 series. So not really super surprised with the Pacers series. We'll see if the Celtics close it out tonight as we're recording this on Monday. But I think my biggest surprise so far of the playoffs has been the Timberwolves and how they've been in this conference finals, because I definitely think they've lost a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah, for me with the Timberwolves, the reason why I picked the Dallas Mavericks in that series, I'm like, Kyrie Irving is going to be the X factor, and I think that him and Luka could both average 30. My problem was I don't know what I'm going to get from Karl Anthony Towns, and the number 2 for Minnesota has not been Karl Anthony Towns. He was 0 of 8 in Game 3. This is a game where you're like, hey, no team ever has come back from being down 0-3, so this is a must-win game. Karl Anthony Towns is a no-show, and then in Game 2, they end up benching Karl Anthony Towns because Naz Reid was absolutely going off in that game, ends up having 23 points. I believe he was like 7 of 8 from downtown in that game, and the one he missed was just the heave at the end. So I was like, really, I don't know what I'm going to be getting from Karl Anthony Towns, and that has been the case here where Cat has just kind of folded. He hasn't been able to rise to the occasion, and I was surprised with how well he played in the first 2 series versus Denver and versus Phoenix. But I'm like, this is all going to come to a head in the conference championship when it all matters the most here. And then also Rudy Gobert. We've been talking about it on the show. We talk about it on the show. Like, this guy is not worth 5 first-round picks. He is not the defensive player of the year. How can you be the defensive player of the year when every single team targets you? You literally have Luka being like, yeah, I know I'm slow, but at least I'm faster than him. Yikes. And Rudy Gobert has been targeted. And then in Game 3, immediately the first play, they get Kyrie Irving ISO'd versus Rudy Gobert. And then Anthony Edwards goes from being the son of Michael Jordan. He goes from being the next Kobe Bryant. He gets from being anointed to being better than Jason Tatum, jumping in that first tier to being the Andrew Wiggins of Jimmy Butler's.
Oh, ouch. And
he is the Andrew Wiggins of Jimmy Butler. He talks as much as Jimmy Butler. He has the athleticism of Andrew Wiggins, and he's kind of like if you merge both of their skill sets together. But we've also seen that he's also disappeared like Andrew Wiggins has the tendency to do. I don't want to hear about a 22-year-old being tired in a conference finals. Like, what is this? You're Anthony Edwards. This is the Big Show versus the Dallas Mavericks. You've been talking trash nonstop throughout the playoffs here, and you've choked in every single fourth quarter. At the end of game 2, it looked like he was taking passing notes from Jaylen Brown. Except the only difference is Jaylen Brown is out here in the conference championships, hitting game-tying threes, not turning the ball over like Anthony Edwards did in game 2. Basically just throwing the series away. Luka hits the 3. Good night. You choked.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't put it better. And also the Jaylen Brown thing, dropping 40 points in game 2 also couldn't forget about that either. But yeah, for me, like, I don't want to hear about the tired Anthony Edwards. I don't want to hear about all the things that they didn't mention in these last 2 rounds. He's young, he's athletic, he's healthy. He should be able to be what he was these last 2 rounds. And it's not like the Mavericks are an impossible team to break through. He's been shooting 36% from the field in this series and hasn't been showing up in the fourth quarter. It's like, I don't want to hear this. If he's going to be this guy who's a top 10 player who's playing both sides of the ball and is supposed to be up there with the echelons of the face of the league, then where is all the excuses that they have with him this time around? Everyone wants to shit on Jason Tatum. Everyone wants to shit on Kyrie and Luka Doncic, but all 3 of these guys have showed up in this round, and the reason why they're going to match up in the finals at this point.
Yeah, and it's like almost after the Timberwolves themselves, it's almost like they felt like they won the NBA Finals after beating the Denver Nuggets. But I was like, if it's not the Nuggets that gets to the finals this year, I've been saying all year, it's going to be the Dallas Mavericks, and it's going to be because of Luka and Kyrie Irving. But the Timberwolves kind of went over everything there, all of their problems, how they choked. However, Stan Van Gundy has been saying that Luka and Kyrie Irving are the most talented backcourt in NBA history. Are you willing to agree with that?
Honestly, yes. Because with Luka, you get somebody who kind of has that LeBron build, can pass, can shoot, can rebound, and overall just an efficient player. And then you have Kyrie, who, outside of Steph Curry, is maybe the best point guard of our generation with the way he has the handles, the way he can shoot, and the way that he's got that clutch gene as well. So whether or not they're the best, I think that they're in the conversation for it.
Yeah, I would definitely think they're in the conversation. You can argue definitely Golden State with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson being the best shooting backcourt still, but Luka and Kyrie Irving, they can do so many different things here that it's like you have 2 players that are going to average 30 in a series, which is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, it gives me flashbacks to the 2016 Cavs where you saw LeBron drop 40, you saw Kyrie drop 40, and it seems like both of them were just just switching off who was scoring and who wasn't. And it's excited to see because we've missed that Kyrie, right? We've missed the Kyrie in Cleveland and how him and LeBron would have these games. And now we're seeing it with him and Luka, and you might be able to see him win without LeBron. You might see Luka get his first title and finally getting the sidekick that we've been waiting for him for. And they're 1 win away from the finals at this point. And at this point, like, what would this legacy mean for them if both of them got their first title? And then obviously Kyrie gets his title without LeBron.
Yeah, I would think it would be a huge title for Kyrie because for Kyrie Irving, he was someone who is slandered and maligned by the media. Everyone in the media was jumping all over Kyrie Irving when he was going through the situation in Brooklyn. He went through Boston, and it seemed like he was going through some issues, and he was still a very young player at his point. So he was still I guess growing up, and it's definitely fair to allow someone to be able to go through that process. But the fact that he went to Dallas, he turned it around, and now he's been able to pair with Luka Doncic, where when he went to Boston, it seemed like there was a constant power struggle where he was like, damn, these kids don't want to listen to me. I was with LeBron James. I hit the shot in Golden State, and then seemed like he was always butting heads with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and there was always just something off chemistry wise in Boston. And then him, KD, James Harden, someone was always hurt in Brooklyn, but he's been able to stay healthy when he had injury issues over the past few years. And then with him and Luka, this was a situation where people are like, defensively, it's never going to be able to work. Where now we're seeing Luka actually step up on defense. We're seeing him. He had 5 steals, I believe, in game 3, which is crazy. And then him and Kyrie Irving, just as a duo, it's pretty much unstoppable. But the media definitely owes Kyrie Irving an apology, and they kind of put everything behind them already. But this is a guy where everyone was jumping all over him when we just need to focus on basketball. We're here to talk about basketball. We're not here to talk about what Kyrie Irving thinks off the court. If he wants to believe that the earth is flat, be my guest. Like, if you want to believe the earth is flat, more power to you if that's what's going to make your boat float in life. But yeah, media jumped all over this, said the duo would never work. And then you also had people picking the Timberwolves in the series. And the media's pretty much been wrong at every single step when it came to the Dallas Mavericks, because I feel like not only Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, but people were calling for Jason Kidd to get fired.
Yeah, Jason Kidd him and Joe Mazzulla have both been dragged through the mud. And I want to touch on the Kyrie situation as well. Like, we mentioned everything. You kind of went through it briefly about the way that he's been able to evolve as a player. I think his opportunity in Boston was he wanted to win without LeBron, but he wanted to be the number one. And I think that with that situation, didn't pan out. Young player going through growing pains. The Nets situation obviously was a disaster as well, but this time around, I think what's helped him is his ability to mature, to evolve as a player, and then also accept the role as being a 1B slash sidekick player to Luka Doncic, where he knows that Luka was the leader in this league. He was the leader of this team for all these years. So now he takes a step back. He's still able to drop 30 points any given night, but accepting that role. But with Jason Kidd, another guy who he obviously had his career and then he took over as head coach. He's coached a number of different teams to this point, but dragged through the mud. And same goes with coaching just as much as playing. You have your growing pains, you go through the motions, and he's coached, I believe he coached the Bucks, and then there was another team he coached before then. And now this is his second opportunity, and he's been able to grow as a coach, and they've got themselves to be a pretty solid team.
Yeah, and they're in the NBA Finals right now. And I think the thing with Kyrie that he's learned, and the reason why it didn't work out with Kevin Durant, is I feel like with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, there's someone who need to focus on just going out there and scoring. Not saying that Kyrie Irving can't run an offense, but he is at his best when he can go out there and just take over a game scoring wise in a fourth quarter. He's still finding guys for lobs, he's still finding open shooters, but with Kyrie Irving and Luka, it's kind of they both accept that, hey, if I'm not on tonight, I'm going to pick it up here. And then if I need to pick it up in the fourth quarter, I'm going to go ahead and then start scoring here. And then he's just accepted that Luka's going to be the guy that runs the offense. He's going to pass, get everyone involved here. And then Kyrie Irving in the fourth quarter, it was great to see in the first round. He wasn't really taking any shots in the first half. He would just turn it all the way up in the fourth quarter. And now they're almost both getting their credit as the best player on the team, where Luka is a better player than Kyrie Irving, but Kyrie is just as special in every single game. And it's not as, I guess, toxic as the LeBron situation felt when he wanted to leave there, where everyone pours the praise on LeBron. And if it doesn't go LeBron's way, everyone else gets blamed for that situation. And there's just this aura around LeBron that Luka doesn't really have that yet, where everyone's not picking up for Luka, where if you have a bad game, you're not getting blamed for it. It's not, why did Kyrie Irving not show up for Luka Doncic? It's like, no, we're in this together. If I need to take over, I'll take over. If Luka wants to take over, he can take over.
Yeah, I think you put that really well. So yeah, I think that's been a great series. And then as far as the Celtics and Pacers series, another guy we mentioned, Jason Kidd, Joe Mazzulla, another head coach that gets a lot of hate. Second year in the league, last year fell flat. But now at this point, they're one win away from the NBA Finals. We've seen Jason Tatum show up in the overtime game in game one. And then Jaylen Brown having an amazing series at this point. Dropped 40 in one game, had one of the most clutch Celtics threes pretty much in the last decade, it feels like.
NBA history, maybe.
Absolute nails of a shot. And they've showed up. They had an 18-point deficit they overcame in game three. It's been great to watch. But Joe Mazzulla, another head coach who got a lot of hate. They were calling for his job last season, and now he might potentially win his first NBA title.
Yeah, he's probably going to win his first NBA title this year. And it's crazy because Joe Mazzulla was thrown into a very tough situation last year where you have the entire Ime Udoka situation where Joe Mazzulla wasn't expected to be the next head coach for another year or two. He was still expecting to be the assistant head coach, and then he's thrown into the situation, and it was his first year as a head coach taking over a team, and he still got his team to the conference finals. They fall down 3-0 versus the Miami Heat, and then they almost come back and win that series. They had a few key injuries in that game 7 where if it's ankle roll for Jason Tatum, maybe they end up becoming the first team to come back from being down 0-3 in a series where they still got to the conference championship, and the Celtics expect an NBA finals every year, but that's still better than, I don't know, 26 other NBA teams in the league. That's still better than 26 other NBA head coaches. And the way that Joe Mazzulla is able to manage personnel, and then also the way he hunts matchups, is really where he thrives here, where he's been able to give this team a solid identity where we're going to play hard on defense, but we're always going to be hunting for the matchup and what can we exploit on the other team. And he led this team to the best record in the NBA this year, and now he's on the verge of making the NBA finals this year. I think Joe Mazzulla has done a great job, but he's just one of those coaches that he just took over for Ime Udoka. People don't really feel like he deserved that opportunity. So he's someone that there's always been a reason for people to find something wrong with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same thing could be said for his star player, Jason Tatum, another guy where since he's been drafted, there's been all these expectations for him. He was drafted into Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and Kyrie came soon after. They had Gordon Hayward. So you see the players around him that he's been able to play with just in his short, brief NBA career. I believe this is season 7 for him. All these people hating on him. He's been to 6 conference finals. He's made it to a finals against one of the greatest players of all time with Steph Curry. And I feel like every year they've shown up, they've had deep playoff runs, but for some reason, NBA media is so harsh to Jason Tatum. Whether it's talking about his fourth quarter antics in game 1 where he didn't score, or mentioning all these moments of his lapse here. What is it with the media and Jason Tatum, and why do they hate on him so much?
Yeah, I think you could look at it two ways. So the media, you could say that they're hating on Jason Tatum, or you could take it as a compliment for what the media expects of Jason Tatum, because he's been to the conference championship 5 out of his first 7 years, but hasn't been able to quite get it done in the NBA finals. So the media does have the expectation of him that, hey, we're not really going to give you the full credit you deserve until you go out there and win the NBA finals. The problem is when you start anointing guys ahead of him, like Anthony Edwards, who has not shown up in the conference finals here. Jason Tatum's, when he was 19, was dunking on LeBron when LeBron was at the peak of his powers in Cleveland in a conference championship in that game when Isaiah Thomas or Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward were both hurt in that series, and they were able to get to the conference finals. And he has beat Joel Embiid every single time that they met in the playoffs. He has gone toe-to-toe with Giannis Antetokounmpo every time they made the playoffs. And my biggest problem is this whole narrative that he's not clutch, when that's just not the case, and that's not NBA what has happened over the course of the few years. Does he have games where he doesn't show up in the fourth quarter and that he gets cold? He does. But when the Celtics backs have been up against the wall versus Giannis and versus Embiid, who people crown constantly as better than Jason Tatum, what has he done? He's shown up and dropped 46 points and 51 points in a game 6. The narrative that he doesn't show up when his team needs him is just not true.
Yeah, no, you nailed it there. Do you think that winning that title is going to finally get that monkey off his back with the media, or maybe they'll be a little bit less harsh to him, or do you think that it's only going to continue to get worse as they have higher expectations?
Yeah, I think if he wins the title, it'll be fine, and it'll definitely put him in that upper echelon. I think the problem the media has with Jason Tatum is he's not the most marketable player in the world, and it's not necessarily his fault, but he's not someone like Anthony Edwards that's going out there and talking trash to players. He's not having these incredible post-game comments that people can really gravitate to. He kind of just goes out there and puts in work, and that's kind of his personality. Doesn't really stir up any controversy that the media can gravitate to. So they're always kind of like, he's just the best player on a championship team that's contending to a finals, and they're not really going to give him any credit until he wins an NBA championship. But my problem is when someone like Chris Broussard goes on the herd and says, yeah, Ja Morant was that saying that Jason Tatum basically said he was in a second tier of NBA superstars, and Ja Morant at one point was being elevated above him. Anthony Edwards is being elevated above him when they haven't accomplished the same as him, haven't been to an NBA finals. Some of these players haven't even been past the second round.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think for somebody his first 7 years, we saw how, LeBron didn't win until he was 28. Michael Jordan didn't win until he was 27. Really, the only superstar that I can think of that had that early run is someone like Kobe, who was paired with Shaq, and you saw them win 3 straight titles when he was just 23 and 24 years old, respectively. It's not common for these superstars to immediately have success. And I think what he's been able to accomplish to this point, as he just turned 25, literally in March, is pretty respectable. I mean, if he can go on and still win these titles that we're anointing him to have, I would say he's had a pretty successful run to this point. I think that the hatred is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think he is going to win the NBA Finals this year. And the thing that people don't understand with Jason Tatum is they just look at the scoring, but they don't look at the overall impact that he has on the game. Versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, he's the only player outside of LeBron James to lead his team in points, blocks, assists, rebounds, and steals. The only player outside of LeBron James. And then when Jason Tatum wants to lock down on defense, he can. Where he thrives is being an all-around player where he's scoring on offense, he's impacting the game on defense, and he doesn't really get his credit as being an all-around defensive player as well, where if he puts his mind to it, he can go out there and lock down a player. I mean, just look at the series last year versus Philadelphia. In games 4 and 5 and 6, he turned into an absolute monster on the defensive end. He was bodying up Joel Embiid at some points. And then at the end of the game versus the Pacers, when Tyrese Halliburton had the ball, Jason Tatum ends up turning Halliburton over, and he took the assignment and ended up locking him down. But Jason Tatum, he's not just a scorer. He's a great all-around defensive player as well.
Yeah, and that's why he's an all-defensive player. So a lot of credit there. We're excited to see how this plays out. But I want to pivot back to Anthony Edwards real quick, because we were watching the conference finals and we were thinking about his draft, and I was looking at it here. Anthony Edwards, obviously they're starting to put him as the superstar of this league. Will he be the face of the league? Time will tell. But it reminded me here, because looking at his draft, I was looking at the draft odds and the draft lottery here. So I want to talk about his draft real quick, because I think it's a fascinating topic. Anthony Edwards was first overall, right? Let's remember that this year was also the same year that the Warriors were removed from almost winning their 3rd straight finals, where Steph got hurt. He was out for most of the year. Klay Thompson was out for the full season, and Draymond Green was also out for the entire season. So there's a period of point in time in an alternate universe where Anthony Edwards gets drafted by the Golden State Warriors. They had the best odds. They were 15 and 65. They were terrible. They had the best odds to win, but ultimately Timberwolves won, them getting the 2nd overall pick, and then the Hornets jumping up from being the 8th best odds all the way up to number 3. So in an alternate universe, Anthony Edwards is potentially a Golden State Warrior, which makes me wonder, had he had been a Golden State Warrior, how much would the NBA have looked different to this point?
I mean, Steph would probably have 7 rings, and I don't think that's overstating it, because Anthony Edwards is a scorer that can go for 40, and he's led his team as the number 1 guy to a conference championship. And I think he would help extend Steph Curry's career. And then you wouldn't need to rely on someone like Klay Thompson now, who's pretty old, as your second scorer. And if Anthony Edwards went to the Warriors, I do think Steph would at least have 6 rings here. And it's kind of a testament to the NBA lottery here, where you have all of these things that could have been changed because the NBA has the worst way of doing the draft possible, where a lot of people are like, well, it stops teams from coasting. And it's good for the NBA because it stops teams from tanking when it really doesn't. Because
No.
when you have a generational talent like a Wemby, when you have a generational talent, um, coming through the draft pipeline, you still have the narratives like tank for Wemby. All of these teams are trading away players so that they can be bad enough where they can raise their chances in the NBA draft lottery. And you definitely see teams try to lose on purpose so they have a higher chance of getting a draft pick. And people said last time we talked about the NBA draft lottery, they're like, oh, yeah, it stops teams from coasting when it doesn't. And that's not really proven at all because you do see teams when they know they don't have a chance start to trade away their players so that they can suck and get the best player possible in the draft. And then you also have situations where the NBA lottery takes away a chance for Steph Curry to have an Anthony Edwards type player to be his second best player on his team again. And then he would have basically another leg to his career where if Steph age 35, I believe
He's 36 now, right?
he's 36 now. So if he had Anthony Edwards on his team the last 2 years and the next 2 years after this, he would definitely be competing for NBA finals and he would at least have 5 or 6 rings and it would have changed the course of NBA history. And it also hurts bad teams as well. But like the Warriors were hurt that year. Steph was out, Clay was out, Draymond was out, and they still need another star to go with Steph Curry. And if they could have gotten Anthony Edwards because the NBA draft lottery wasn't as stupid as it was set up today, I mean, the Warriors would still be competing for NBA titles today.
They could have been a dynasty because think about it. Well, even a bigger dynasty, I should say. A perfect storm where Kevin Durant leaves, Steph Curry's out for the season, Klay Thompson's out for the season, Draymond's banged up. They are the worst team because they're running out Jonathan Kuminga and Jordan Poole. They get hurt, and then they get Anthony Edwards, and then exactly what you say. Maybe they don't win 6 or 7, but they at least win another title. There's no way they don't. But instead, this draft lottery, which you touched on it earlier, not only does it hurt a team like Golden State, who has a chance to continue their leg on this dynasty here, but also think about a team like the Pistons this year, who are god awful, absolutely terrible, 28 consecutive losses, picking 5th overall, absolutely disgraceful. But it gets better because they fall to the number 2 overall pick. So instead of Anthony Edwards, you see players like at this time it was James Wiseman or LaMelo Ball. And they went need, they picked James Wiseman, who is one of the biggest busts in NBA history at this point. He's at least in the conversation of the last decade, just for what we're talking about here. Could have had Anthony Edwards, but instead it's James Wiseman, has done literally nothing in the NBA. And then LaMelo Ball. Do you think, at least at nothing else, yeah, they didn't get Anthony Edwards, but if they got LaMelo Ball, would that have at least moved the needle and maybe they win number 5?
Maybe. I don't think so, though, because LaMelo Ball has had his injury issues, and I think I don't really think he would fit with the Golden State Warriors because I don't think having another point guard would help that team. They needed another player who could be a scorer like Anthony Edwards, and they needed another player who could play defense. Not really LaMelo Ball's strong suit there. And then he's also had some issues on and off the court where he's currently being sued right now for running over someone's foot. Has not been able to stay healthy over the course of his career. So I don't think LaMelo Ball really would have been a difference maker in the Warriors winning another ring. Maybe he could have been like a Magic Johnson there for the Warriors. Not saying he would have been as good as Magic Johnson, but just a tall point guard who could also score with Steph Curry. But at the same time, I don't think LaMelo Ball is helping the Warriors win another championship.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Especially because I think that what turned them off from them was also the LeVar Ball nonsense that was still circulating, the big baller brand situation, which is ultimately why they took James Wiseman. But the point of this take is really what the NBA did to us, which is steal Anthony Edwards from Golden State, steal another 2 or 3 titles from Steph Curry, potentially being the greatest of all time, because if he were to win 6, he would be in that conversation. So the NBA lottery, we talked about it the last several weeks, about how it is the worst system in NBA history, worst system in sports history, professional organized sports. They stole Anthony Edwards on the Golden State Warriors. They stole potentially the greatest player of all time, their greatness.
Yeah, and for like to play devil's advocate here, don't you think like the Warriors were injured that year? Don't you think the Minnesota Timberwolves deserve a star? Don't you think they deserve another chance at getting back to the conference championship? They had to suffer through having Tom Thibeadu as their head coach, Jimmy Butler with the backups, beating everyone on that team and still exiting in the first round. They have to suffer through having Karl Anthony Towns there, their team trading for Rudy Gobert. Now they have Anthony Edwards. They're back in the conference championship, and they go up against the Dallas Mavericks, and they're probably going home right now, and we'll see what the future holds. They may not keep Karl Anthony Towns. His future is kind of in question, but we'll see what happens with the Timberwolves. But don't you think, I don't know, the Timberwolves deserve to have a player like Anthony Edwards with their poverty history? I mean, it had been 20 years since they'd made a conference championship.
Yeah, no, they don't actually. You know why they don't deserve it? I think when bad teams make bad decisions, they deserve to continue to be bad, right? So I look at the Timberwolves, right? They had not one but two opportunities to take Steph Curry. They drafted players like Wesley Johnson, Rick Rubio, Johnny Flynn throughout their entire history for that 20 years. So yes, do I think that suffering should inevitably end? Of course. I am a humanitarian at heart. That's why they call me Humanitarian Jameson. However, poor decisions deserve poor results. So them making those dumb decisions is ultimately why they should continue to suffer. Now, they get Anthony Edwards. They make the right decision. They take him instead of James Wiseman first overall. Great decision. Ends up working out great for them. And now their suffering is temporarily over. But do I think they deserved Anthony Edwards? Over what I just said about Golden State? No, I don't think so. I don't think a team that makes dumb decisions over 20 years and suffer and suffer and suffer deserve to get rewarded with a player like Anthony Edwards when they have continued to be stupid.
Yeah. And speaking of teams that continue to be stupid, Tyrese Halliburton was taken 12th in this draft over the star-studded players like James Wiseman in this draft, over LaMelo Ball. I mean, just picture Tyrese Halliburton in a Hornets jersey. I don't want to, but you can at home. And over the stud in Indiana, his teammate right now, Obi Toppin.
Toppin, Killian Hayes as well, one of the worst players in the league.
Who?
Killian Hayes. Unknown superstar there. Halliburton was one of those lottery picks that nobody saw coming, went to the Kings, was kind of contesting with De'Aaron Fox, and now he's finally made his role there. Unfortunately, he was sidelined in game 3 and most likely won't play in game 4, but this is another guy that they missed out on. They could have at least traded back and taken Halliburton. But he slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, and you always see this in the NBA draft too. It's where it's like I feel like the NBA draft is probably the hardest to nail, especially like there's usually one player everyone knows is going to be really good, but we've seen this even with Luka, where Stephen A. Smith was like complaining that if the Suns didn't take DeAndre Ayton, or if they took Luka over DeAndre Ayton, it would be a massive mistake. And it's like the NBA like analysts are probably some of the worst in sports, where I feel like they've gotten every single thing wrong in the playoffs. And when it comes to the draft, it's like I feel like they get pretty much most of the picks wrong.
Oh, 100%. You had people had the Suns beating the Timberwolves in the early rounds. And look how that panned out. That was an absolute disaster. They were predicting the Mavericks to be first round exits. I mean, wrong pick after wrong pick. It's been absolutely disgraceful. And it's funny because if we were going to talk about what Stephen A. Smith said back then, imagine if they did take Luka Doncic, where would they be? I mean, they would have paired him with Devin Booker, and I think at the time they still had Chris Paul. So you would have had a big 3 there. God only knows how good that team would have been. Could they have beaten the Bucks a few finals ago? But they're always wrong. They always are.
The funniest thing too is like Luka has been like the number one nightmare for the Phoenix Suns too. It's like talking about NBA drafts. Like you could have paired Luka with Devin Booker, and Devin Booker is playing with Kevin Durant right now, but he still has not won a playoff game without Chris Paul. It's crazy. He got
Mhm.
swept by the Timberwolves, and then you could have had Luka Doncic on that team instead of DeAndre Ayton. And DeAndre Ayton, fine NBA player, but was he better than Luka or Trae Young? No. And you could have had Trae Young on that team as well, at worst.
Yeah, no, they missed out there, and now he's playing in Portland and being a serviceable center in the league, but they definitely whiffed on that one.
Yeah, and then you talk about like players who or the NBA draft lottery costing Steph Curry some championships with Anthony Edwards, where the Warriors should have had the first overall pick if the NBA ran itself like a normal draft, like the NFL. Draymond Green has also cost Steph Curry some championships, probably cost the Warriors the greatest season ever. They had the Cavaliers down 3-1, and then Draymond pretty much single handedly shifted all of the momentum to the Cleveland Cavaliers in that series.
Yeah, I think it's fun. We should go through all of their suspensions that he's had, whether it's choking out Joseph Nurkic, whether it's kneeing LeBron in the balls, stomping on DeMontis Sabonis, all these different suspensions that have occurred over time, or whether it is pissing off Kevin Durant, the best player on that team at that current time, alienating him from that team and losing out on potentially a three-peat or more with Kevin Durant. I would say Draymond Green has cost him at least one or two titles. What would you say?
I mean, if it comes to like alienating Kevin Durant, it's like, why are you out there calling Kevin Durant a bitch repeatedly? And Kevin Durant like went and talked about it. He was just confused why Draymond was doing that because Draymond Green was the one who ended up getting suspended in that NBA Finals. And I think the Warriors do win that NBA Finals if Draymond doesn't get suspended and cap off the greatest season ever because they needed to win that series as early as possible because Steph Curry's knees were not doing very well in game 7. Draymond did have a pretty big game 7 in that series, but it's like, you want to talk about a guy who was crying after that NBA Finals. Kevin, come save us. We need you on our team. And then after Kevin Durant comes to the Warriors and wins 2 titles there, then he's the one who's calling out Kevin Durant, calling him a bitch when he's the one who should be like, Kevin, ignore everything that the media is saying. They're just gonna remember that you won those NBA championships in the history books because look at Magic Johnson with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, people argue that he's the GOAT. Some people argue that Kareem is the GOAT. Do they take away the legitimacy of Magic Johnson's titles? No, they do not. Larry Bird, when he won his titles, had Kevin McHale on his team, one of the greatest six-mans in the league, had Dennis Johnson, had some of the best teams in NBA history. Look at Kobe Bryant. He played with Shaquille O'Neal. Do people try and delegitimize those titles? No. So instead of calling him a bitch, instead of alienating from his team, you should be like, you should stay with us so we can continue to have one of the greatest runs in NBA history. Sure, we all got hurt versus the Toronto Raptors, but we still have 3 more rings in us if we all stay together. And if he stayed with the Warriors, Kevin, you have a chance instead of having 2 rings to have 5 or 6. Then people will put you above LeBron James. People will put you in the same conversation as Kobe Bryant. And he should have been doing everything he can to keep Kevin Durant on that team instead of pushing him away. And then you end up winning 1 NBA title after that, probably the only title that the Warriors are going to win. And it's just funny that Draymond, of all people, is talking about how people like hate on him and talking about all of his haters in the media when Draymond is probably the biggest hater as a player for other people in the NBA. When we make fun of Rudy Gobert on this flight, but if you're going to talk about people hating on you, you're definitely a hater of Rudy Gobert. You're a hater on the Boston Celtics. And then also you're one of the biggest haters in NBA media, just on other NBA players. And then you're also talking about how the NBA is not setting you up to be wealthy because they fine you $100,000. And he's like, I don't get why they fine us. Like, maybe don't assault people and they won't fine you.
Maybe don't kill people. Don't stomp on people's chest. These are all things that other NBA players don't do. Like, I don't know. I was watching Game 3 against Mavericks and Timberwolves, and I noticed, Luca didn't choke anybody. He didn't stomp on anybody's chests. He didn't knee anybody in the balls. Kyrie also didn't do that. Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. The only thing I saw Rudy Gobert do was put himself on ice skates that last half right there.
Yeah.
But it was weird. I was watching the conference finals, and honestly, every playoff round to this point, nobody kneed anybody in the balls. Nobody stomped on anybody's chests. Nobody called anybody a bitch. At least not, didn't pick that up on the audio at all. Yeah, so it's weird. I mean, Warriors not in the playoffs, aka Draymond not in the playoffs. Didn't see anybody get any of those things happen to them. So I don't know if I was watching a different game, but does that happen in the NBA often? Do people get kneed in the balls, stomped on chests, all those other derogatory actions there?
Yeah, it's weird because it's like Draymond thinks that to be good, he needs to be derogatory and then also try and assault people. He's like, well, I can't be good unless I get a technical foul, get suspended, and hurt my team. It's just not the way I can do it. I need to get suspended versus the Memphis Grizzlies and get kicked out of that game and wave to the crowd and then have some crazy antics there. I need to try and stomp on Domantas Sabonis there. I need to try and make sure that Steven Adams can't have a family in the future here. These are all things I feel I need to do to be a great player, but I have no idea why the NBA would fine me for any of these things. He's like, I'm getting fined $100,000 for trying to stomp on someone. It just blows my mind. It's like the NBA doesn't want me to be wealthy, even though I get paid hundreds of millions of dollars to play a game. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I don't know. Let me just think about this real quick with Draymond. Does he have any? Oh, wait, that Kia commercial that he has. Oh, wait, his own shoes that he might have. All of these other sponsorships, the State Farm commercials, all these other commercials that he has. Are those free? Is that just like, added on with his salary, right? That's just free money, right? Oh yeah, that's right. Extra money on top of his salary, on top of his max contract that's going to kill the Warriors, on top of everything else, his sponsorships, his deals. That 100,000. Does he even notice that leave his bank account at this point with how rich that he is? If we want to really dig into Draymond Green's history as well, I think that him being one of the most hated players in the NBA also, I think, plays into why Kevin Durant left. Because that Warriors team wasn't Steph Curry. Everyone loved Steph Curry. Wasn't Klay Thompson. Kevin Durant, he was hated because he joined the super team. But I think part of the reason why also that team was also so hated was because of Draymond. Because of him doing all these antics that he had. And another reason why I think Kevin Durant ultimately left because of it.
Yeah, and he's definitely cost the Warriors there. And it's so funny, like, he has won NBA championships, but he gets like so high and mighty on his horse where, like, perfect example is they're talking about how DeMar DeRozan won clutch player of the year and Alex Caruso was on like the NBA TNT show and Draymond's like, yeah, no, he wasn't. It was Steph Curry. It's like, y'all were like bounced from the play-in tournament. And then Chuck was like, so are you. It's like, not like you guys did anything special this year. You were also bounced from the play-in tournament. It's like, what are you talking about, Draymond? Are you in the playoffs right now? No. Like, Steph is a better player all time than DeMar DeRozan, but it doesn't mean that in the regular season he was more clutch than DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And the way he just rides Steph Curry too, which I would too, but yeah, he's got that high horse about him.
Yeah, and then Draymond definitely in the news, definitely cost the Warriors some opportunities for a championship, maybe cost them the Warriors' greatest season being capped off by getting suspended in that 73-9 season in the NBA Finals. But we also have the nursing home of the NBA, the Phoenix Suns. They have a new owner. He's taking swing after swing after swing for the fences. He's now gone through 3 head coaches. Mike Budenholzer now there. Apparently, they're going after LeBron James to be one of the next players on that team. Do you think if the Phoenix Suns, with Rich Paul saying that LeBron James is basically a free agent this season, depending on what the Lakers do as far as free agency additions, do you think Phoenix, only a few hours away from LA, so it's not too far away from LeBron's businesses, fairly manageable there, do you think him, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker would be able to win an NBA title together?
It depends on how many balls are on the court at once. I mean, like all of these players need the ball in order to do good things. When I think about LeBron James in Phoenix, I'm excited because I'll be in Phoenix by the end of the year. But um, LeBron James is also how old? 40 years old by the time the season begins next year. You know what this really makes me think of? Now, I know LeBron James is still a very good NBA player, but it gives me Michael Jordan on the Wizards vibes, or gives me Dominique Wilkins on the Celtics vibes, or Paul Pierce on the Wizards. Like, I don't think he's going to be to that level of bad because he's still obviously very solid, but I don't want to see him on the Phoenix Suns. I'd rather him just stay in LA and just retire after this next year. Have him play with his son and then retire. I don't want to see him go to another team and try to ring chase with Kevin Durant, of all people, with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. That team just sounds like a nightmare. Just hearing that in my mind. The big four players who need the ball all at once, four players who now at this point are injury prone, four divas. I don't want that for the NBA. I don't want to see Phoenix Suns LeBron. I would rather him just stay in LA. Or you know what? You can go back to Cleveland for all I care. Do the three-peat. Do the reunion with the Cavaliers that nobody asked for. But don't go to Phoenix. That doesn't make any sense. I understand it's close to LA, but at the same time, it's a disaster. That's just already. Think about what the disaster already was this past season. They won 47 games, and you have three players who are all all-stars. And I know they were banged up, but this is the last thing we want to see. We don't want to see LeBron on another team. Just stay where you are at this point.
Yeah, the problem is, like, I don't feel like the ball, like being in, like, having too many balls on the court. If they trade Bradley Beal would be a problem because LeBron would be fine being a point guard. Kevin Durant doesn't really need the ball to be super effective. And then Devin Booker clearly is not suited to run an offense here where you want Devin Booker thinking just score first all the time. And that's where Devin Booker is at his best, not when Devin Booker is thinking, okay, I need to run the offense. Is it time for me to get Kevin and Bradley involved? Is it time for me to pass to Josh Okogie or Yusuf Nurkic of all people, or is it time for me to go score? And I think LeBron would help bring that scoring mindset back to Devin Booker, someone who was anointed at one point as the next Kobe Bryant, similar to Anthony Edwards, and had made an NBA Finals. My biggest problem would be, okay, if you have Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Devin Booker on the court, who is playing defense exactly?
It's not LeBron.
Yeah,
it's not Devin Booker. Not KD.
It would just be a layup line to the rim. So it's like, I feel like if you want to sell tickets, that would be cool. But I don't think he would necessarily take you over the hump as far as winning a championship in Phoenix. It'd be cool to see LeBron and KD play together. And maybe with Devin Booker, you would get to a second round. But I don't think this situation would be necessarily better than the Los Angeles Lakers. I think it would be more of a lateral move than a move in a higher direction and elevating yourself in another tier because Devin Booker and Kevin Durant both have injury issues. LeBron is old. Like, just stay in LA at this point. That's where all of your businesses and income are coming from. And then if you want to play with Bronny and Phoenix drafts them, okay, if that's the goal, that's fine. But then you're also opening yourself up to, well, if you're just going to play with any team that drafts Bronny, then we're going to see some really bad team trade all of their draft capital to get up to the number 2, number 3 pick if the Hawks aren't going to take Bronny, and then they're going to try and take him just so they can have LeBron on his team. And then you're going to see LeBron play for some team like either the Pistons, or we're going to see LeBron on the Raptors, which would be cursed, something like that.
I don't want to see that either. You know what? I just mentioned Michael Jordan on the Wizards. You know how disgusting that jersey looks like? It's like if we saw like the last leg, right? We saw Tom Brady on Tampa Bay. That was fine. We saw Joe Montana on the Chiefs, Peyton Manning on the Broncos. But I don't want to see that with LeBron. We already saw him. We saw LA, Miami, and Cleveland. That's the three jerseys I can accept to see LeBron in. But seeing him on the Raptors, the Wizards, the Spurs, like whatever it might be, I don't want to see him in another uniform. Just stay where you are and retire. You're going to enter season 23 of your career. You were easily the best player in year 23 of any player in NBA history at this point. I don't want to see you continue to play on another team and do another ring chase with another team when you're 40 years old. You played when you were 18 years old. You played in 2003 at this point. I don't want to see any more teams with LeBron. It's just going to be sad. We already know this will be a forgotten token in his career. Just stop while you're ahead.
Yeah, and I don't understand what Phoenix is doing. You have a new owner who's like ultra aggressive at this point, and if you do get LeBron, it's like, okay, you still have all the same issues as before, maybe a slightly better situation if you can trade Bradley Beal for some role players, but that contract is one of the worst contracts in the NBA, so I don't know how many people are going to want to take on Bradley Beal's contract here for him to play half of the games.
Yeah, I don't know either. Especially he's making what, $50 million at this point?
Yeah.
His contract's abysmal. So best of luck. Maybe it's a sign and trade with LA, pair him with Anthony Davis, but
Ugh.
I don't even know if they would even do that.
I don't think the Lakers would want to do that. No.
No. So whoever wants Bradley Beal, I guess, maybe a 3-team trade.
Orlando, maybe. I could see Bradley Beal in Orlando, especially because Orlando wants Clay at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. We shall see how that plays out.
Yeah, but we do have a bit of a hairy situation brewing in the WNBA as well here. So there's been a lot of, I guess, controversy around Caitlin Clark going into the WNBA here. And for someone who's only, I believe she's 21, 22 years old,
22, yeah.
coming into the WNBA, the amount of just, it seems like almost viciousness and vitriol. There's a bunch of clips of like WNBA players trying to clothesline her, just getting beat up here. And there's just so much toxicity around the conversation around Caitlin Clark where I feel like for her, it's like, can we leave her alone? She's like only 22 years old. She led the NCAA in points, broke the record, broke the assist record as well, got to 2 Final Fours in the NCAA there. And now she's going into the WNBA, and the Fever for the first time sold out their tickets. There are bigger arenas being talked about because people want to see Caitlin Clark, and then it's just being made into this weird culture war issue. And can we just talk about basketball here and then not make it toxic when we're talking about a 22-year-old? We're talking about someone who has feelings here. We're talking about someone who is one of the best players in NCAA history as far as she did break all of the records here. And then people talk about how Angel Reese won a title. Guess what? Angel Reese had the better team in that situation. And then same with Georgia. They were an undefeated team there. They both had a better team than Caitlin Clark as well.
Yeah, no, I don't understand this hatred either. For the WNBA, this is exactly what they wanted. This is what you would want for a league that has really struggled to bring attention to their league for the last 30 years of their existence. They've needed that Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, LeBron James figure. They'll sell them tickets, and they finally have that player there. Finally, they're no longer traveling on buses or traveling in coach flights. They now have their own private flights now, and their viewership has increased dramatically since then. Their ad revenues increased. When they go to renegotiate their TV contracts, expected to be much higher. So finally, they have their opportunity. And we're hearing comments from people like Jamel Hill who are saying the only reason why she's successful is because she's straight and white. Has nothing to do with that. I won't dive into the full politics of that, but this is a player that you've been wanting to have. They had the shooting competition with Steph Curry, and she went toe-to-toe with him. This is the perfect player to build around for the league that can dramatically grow their numbers. And it's been comment after comment from either former WNBA players, current WNBA players, or other people, whether it be on The View or other media outlets, just trashing the girl. And I'm like, why are they doing this? This is exactly what you would want. You would want to have a player like this. And I just don't understand the hatred for her. This is the best this is the best situation you could possibly be in. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's the best situation you could be in when you're talking about increasing your arena size because you have capacity limits and you have more fans that want to see the WNBA, and you should take this as a win, and you shouldn't try and spin this into a negative and drum up a bunch of controversy, because you had all of this momentum, you had all of this positivity, and now it's turning into this toxic culture war issue where you have The View talking about it, and The View is basically for NPCs who watch daytime television. I'm not really sure who watches The View at this point besides airports and random people at the gym. But when you have even LeBron James, and LeBron James is definitely someone who's more woke, someone who's definitely more socially conscious, and even he is going out there talking about how the conversation around Caitlin Clark is an issue. He is supporting her. He is saying how this is a good thing for the WNBA. It's like, can we listen to LeBron? Can we listen to JJ Redick? Can we listen to Charles Barkley when he's talking about, it's like, it's time to stop hating on Caitlin Clark? And it's like, okay, even if you think this is an issue, it's still Caitlin Clark is a person. We need to stop piling on her and actually think about like how this is affecting her, because it can't be good for her mental health when she has all of these people making this into a weird culture war issue. And if I was her, I'd be like, okay, if this is how it's going to be, where I step into the WNBA after bringing all this publicity to it, when the only publicity you had before was someone getting arrested in Russia because she decided to, I don't know, break Russian laws, which is not really a great thing to do when you're in a foreign country, and not, you should actually be aware what the laws are there and how much severe Russia's penalties are compared to the US. That was the only publicity you had before. And then you have Caitlin Clark selling out all these tickets. If I was her, I'd be like, okay, Ice Cube offered me a bunch of money to go to the Big Three. He offered me ownership in the league there. I'm just going to take my talents there and leave if this is going to be the conversation, because I don't need to be here. And I already have someone else, Ice Cube, who is one of the most, I guess, socially powerful people when it came to rap, just social change in general, offering me this. Like, I don't need to deal with all of this nonsense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. She has leverage too. You mentioned the big three. I'm sure there's plenty of other leagues that she could go to and make substantially more money. The WNBA need her more than she needs them. So at this point, the conversation's got to change, or either we're going to see her break and we'll see her not live up to her potential, which would be devastating, or we're going to just see the WNBA crumble because of it. This is a prime opportunity for the WNBA to dramatically grow, and if they keep talking the way they are, they're going to fuck it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it just turns people off to it too. And it's like what Bill Burr was talking about with the WNBA. It's like, well, the problem with it is like, we have like the WNBA, we gave you your own league, but you would rather watch something like The Real Housewives, where it's just a bunch of people talking behind each other's backs and like putting each other down. And this is exactly what the situation is like. It's a bunch of people kind of ripping her apart and putting her down. And this is why, I don't know, it's going to be hard for a league to thrive there, where it'd be like if Larry Bird came into the league and they're like, oh, well, viewership is up because of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, which is like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark here, but we're going to pile on Larry Bird because the only reason why he's popular is because he looks like an 80s porn star.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think that's ridiculous. Caitlin Clark, it's time for her to get the better media coverage. Last thing in the NBA that we want to talk about, because it touches on what we were talking about the last few weeks, which is the downfall of Tom Thibeadu. Because we've talked about it. We saw how the Knicks were absolutely gashed in that Pacers series. We saw them lose literally everybody. Comment section was not a fan of us that week. But we were watching the Joakim Noah podcast. He was on one of the NBA podcasts, and he was talking about playing under Tom Thibeadu and the Kyle Korver lore, which I didn't know it really existed. This is back in Chicago, where he would witness Kyle Korver stay in his car to the very last minute, just blankingly staring at the arena until he absolutely had to come in, reminding us of all of us who maybe work in an office or, you know, having to clock in for work, just waiting, having that little time in between, because he didn't want to go in there because they would be doing defensive slides. the day after a large playoff game. So the Tom Thibodeau arc, where the comment section has driven us crazy for it, has absolutely tore us apart. Looks like Joakim Noah is on the Brickyard side.
Yeah, and he talked about like Tom Thibodeau and his issue as a head coach here. And I think the point that people misunderstood is we're saying that the Knicks were tired and they lost because Tom Thibodeau plays people way too much during the regular season. He rides guys in January, he rides guys in February, and the injuries and them being tired and losing goes hand in hand because throughout his career, he has ruined many other careers here. And Derrick Rose, he ran him into the ground. And it's not just us that talk about Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau is also voted the most times of any other head coach, the coach that people would want to play for the least, not by us, by the NBA players. And what does that tell you? It means the NBA players don't really mess with Tom Thibodeau. Jimmy Butler and him had their words exchanged back and forth during the NBA playoffs. And then the NBA players themselves are also talking about how the coach they want to play for the least is Tom Thibodeau, and it takes a special type of mentality to want to go out there and play for him. But again, his coaching style, if we're doing defensive slides after losing a playoff game, if we're working out hard after an NBA playoff game, it can benefit you. If you do a light workout and you're lifting some weights after your game, sure, we'll get the lactic acid out. But when it comes to Tom Thibodeau, this is a guy who has a track record of getting his entire team injured. It's a guy who has a track record of ruining Derrick Rose's career, and we kind of got robbed of seeing Derrick Rose become one of the greatest players in NBA history when he had such a young and promising career. Some of that is bad luck with Derrick Rose. Some of that, though, is on Thibodeau when we see him go from team to team to team, and we see Jalen Brunson get hurt. We see Julius Randle get hurt. We see OG Anunoby get hurt. We see Bogdan Bogdanovic get hurt. We see Josh Hart get hurt in that game, and he was pushing through it. And then we also see Mitchell get hurt as well in that series. And I'm like, okay, it'd be one thing if it was the NBA finals or the conference finals, but this guy's been past the second round once. You know what you have to do to get to the second round? Win one playoff series. Okay, pretty reasonable. You know what you need to do to get past the second round? Win two. Dude has only done that once. One time. And now with the East, Giannis, if he's healthy next year, you're not beating the Bucks. The Pacers' future is brighter than yours. Rick Carlisle doesn't get his entire team injured. You're lucky if you get to a conference championship.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was their year. I put them in the conference finals before the playoffs even started because I felt like they were the healthiest. Well, to some extent, they were at least they had the chemistry and they had the gritty mentality that maybe they could make the conference finals. But as soon as they lost to the Pacers, this was the window that they had because we know the NBA, we know how the DNA of it changes each year. I think the Pacers have a much brighter future with Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton. I think that obviously the Bucks, with what happened with him and Dame, both of them going down, obviously they're going to be back in the mix next year, assuming they both stay. The Celtics aren't going anywhere. Everyone's locked up. And the list goes on. I think, what happens with Cleveland, how they change that up, they are still around. I don't think the Knicks are going to have that same magic that they had this year. This was a once in a couple years situation. And especially with, I think, seeing all these players go down, do they start to lose the locker room a little bit? One of the things also Joakim Noah mentioned on the podcast was they'd be up by 20 and they'd have, maybe like two threes hit the last minute of the game. Maybe they win by 14 and him ripping them apart for that. That's something that wears on you over the course of a full season, but then also over the course of multiple seasons. Will he start to lose the locker room if this continues?
Yeah, and the thing is, with a coach like that who's gonna rip you for like missing two threes there, and rip you for regular season games and constantly put that pressure on you, at some point you have to accomplish something. And Tom Thibodeau hasn't. Like at some point you have to be, if you're gonna have the mentality of a Bill Belichick. What does Bill Belichick have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 rings from being a coach with the New York Giants. And Greg Popovich is a similar coach who would rip people for this, but you also have to have that balance there. And then even a coach like Chris Finch for the Minnesota Timberwolves gets his team to the conference championship. A very intense guy, but what they say is he has a very good sense of humor as well, where it doesn't really seem like Tom Thibeadu has kind of that give and take. And when you're multiple times the NBA players voted as the least likely coach that they would want to play for, the coach you'd want to play for the least, what does that tell you? Help is not on the way. And it's just going to be running it back with the same team every single year. And how often do we see a player like Jalen Brunson being righted this much in his career for year after year after year? Typically, those players don't make it that long where they're able to carry the load for 5, 6, 7 years with this amount of usage rate. If you're going to ride someone like Brunson this much without having a bona fide second star in that team, you're going to have maybe a 3 to 5 year window, and then his body's going to start to break down. And we saw that in the second round happen.
We saw that happen with Derrick Rose. That was exactly the situation that happened 15 years ago. He's had the highest usage rate since joining the Knicks, and he's been fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but they need another person there for them to solidify it. Otherwise, he's going to wear down. The only player that had that high of a usage rate that succeeded for a long time was the unicorn. That was LeBron James.
Yeah.
And obviously, he had his help along the way with whether it be D Wade or Kyrie Irving and all the other guys in between. But he doesn't have that here. He's got, Dante DiVincenzo, friend of the show. But they don't have that number 2. Julius Randle certainly isn't. So we'll see if his philosophy changes. He's been coaching for 30 years, so I doubt it will. But remains to be seen whether he'll finally have that pan out for him.
Yeah, but we saw it from Joakim Noah, and then we've also seen it from the NBA players voting him as someone that they do not want to play for. So I don't think help is on the way. Nick's chance was this year. Unfortunately, that they did not get it done, but looking forward to covering and previewing the NBA Finals next week. But we do talk about the NFL on the show. This is known for our NFL takes, having the documents for the NFL and the NBA this year. I mean, it's a document. We have it right here. And guess what? I've only gotten one NBA series wrong this year. How many other NBA analysts can say that they've only picked one series wrong this year? Not too many. And the same goes with our NFL takes when we talk about predicting the next up-and-coming teams before anyone else, talking about Cole Kmet, talking about the Lions, talking about the Texans before anyone else. We are on the Texans bandwagon there, and we're here to break down the magic, and you can actually see it play out in the offseason in real time, where we're able to predict these next up-and-coming teams. If we went over a list of where we were wrong, it would take a lot less time if we went over the podcast of where we are right here. But we are covering the NFC and AFC North this year, and this week, not this year, we're going over all the teams this year. Sorry, I'm sick. Kind of not there with my brain here.
You're losing it.
I'm losing it. But we're going to be talking about the NFC North and AFC North schedules this week, picking every single team, and then we're going to go over their records, where we think they'll finish, and then we'll be able to see it at the end of the season, how it's reflected there. Do you want to start in the NFC or the AFC?
Well, we know the AFC was the first conference in NFL history to have every team have a winning season last year. So let's go with them and see how it pans out. We saw the Ravens. Obviously, they had their 1 seed. We saw the Steelers were 9-8. The Browns were 10-7. They had their success. So the way we have it anointed here, I'll be picking for the Ravens and Browns, and you'll be picking for your Cincinnati Bengals and your beloved Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll go through all the rankings there. We'll give our predictions before we go over our times, and then also afterwards, giving our breakdown of how we think things are going to pan out. As we go pivot to the AFC North, before we go over each team's schedule and give our predictions, how do you think it's going to fare? Because obviously the Bengals were last, the Ravens were the 1 seed, and then a couple other surprises there. How do you expect the AFC North to play out this year without looking at the schedules?
Ooh, I don't. Yeah, without looking at the schedules, I do think that the Bengals are going to win the division this year. I definitely think it will be a comeback year for Joe Burrow if he stays healthy. And this division is becoming one of those divisions similar to the AFC East, where we're having a different division winner. With the Bengals, I definitely see them coming back and winning the division if Burrow is healthy. The Ravens, I'm really interested in with Derrick Henry, and I'll definitely think there'll be 1A and 1B with those two teams. And then the Steelers and the Browns are just in a lower tier in that division right now because we don't know what we're getting from Deshaun Watson on a week to week basis. Then they have Jameis Winston eating W's on the sideline there, rapping to people, trying to get everyone motivated on the sideline. And then Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. Ugh.
Yeah, my early predictions here. I think the Bengals have one of the highest chances in the league of going from worst to first. I also think that the Browns are one of those teams that, we saw all these winning seasons occur within that division last year. I don't see how that happens this year. I think what happened last year was unprecedented. I think them going on their Flacco run was really great to see, but I don't see that happening again this year. I don't trust Deshaun Watson and what he's been in Cleveland so far, being a below average quarterback since going there. How will Nick Chubb be coming off an ACL tear? And I think their defense will still be really good, but I think their offense is the biggest question mark for me. So Cleveland, I'm unsure about. The Steelers, I think it's pretty much certain they'll be a winning season because it just seems to be 9-8 every year. I think
Yeah.
Russell Wilson will make them better because Kenny Pickett was just awful before them. So really, I think it's going to be between the Ravens and Bengals and who's going to contend for that division.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the schedule, see how it's going to fall, just picking every single game. So let's go from worst to first here. So let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals. Hit me with their games.
Okay, so Bengals, they start their season with our beloved New England Patriots in Cincinnati.
In Cincinnati, Cincinnati Bengals typically not great in the first 2 months of the season. However, I think the New England Patriots have a lot to figure out. New head coach, new quarterbacks on that team. Don't really have an offense yet. So I think the Bengals defense can win it on their own. So I will go the Bengals in this game.
So they start off 1-0. But unluckily for them, week 2, they have to go to Arrowhead to face the 2-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, 2-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. I am going to pick them to lose that game, even though they fared pretty well against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bengals just really aren't that impressive in September, and it seems like they're asleep at the wheel in the first month of the season. So for that reason, I'm going to have them going 1-1 here versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay. Well, lucky for them, they'll have 8 days to prepare for their next matchup. On Monday Night Football, they'll be they'll be at home to be facing off against the number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, and the Washington Commanders.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough matchup for them. However, I will pick the Bengals to win that game. Coming off a tough loss versus the Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Burrow does show up in prime time. Commanders also have a lot to figure out there as well, so I will go with the Bengals in that game, have them go to 2-1.
Okay. Well, then the very next week are going to have to trek all the way down to Tepperville to take on the Carolina Panthers 1:00 game on Sunday. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you better win that game or you're not making the playoffs if you lose to the Panthers. Sorry.
You can't lose to the Panthers. So at that point, they're 3-1. They have pretty easy start to the season. And then they go on Sunday, the very next week, at home to face the Ravens.
The Ravens, I think they'll split with the Ravens, and I'll pick them to lose that game.
Okay.
Started out pretty easy in September, however, still finding your footing, so I'll have them going 3-2 and lose to the Ravens.
Very fair. Well, then at this point, by this point, it's week 6. They go to East Rutherford for Sunday Night Football to take on Bobby
Okereke.
Sorry, let's try that again. Bobby Okereke and the Giants on Sunday Night Football. They will be away for Sunday Night Football thoughts.
Yeah, if Joe Burrow loses to Walt Jr. and the Giants, I will burn my jersey. So
Oof, that's tough.
4-2.
So they're 4-2, and then the very next week they go Sunday. They go and face the Browns. Browns have given them trouble in the past. Thoughts here?
Yeah, I'll have them going 4-3 versus the Browns. You're coming off I believe that was Monday Night Football versus the Giants there. Short week. Cleveland Browns have kind of been the Bengals killer for Joe Burrow over the past few years, so I will have them losing to the Cleveland Browns.
All right, and then 4 o'clock game the following week at home against the Eagles.
At home against the Eagles, I think they're finding their footing by now. At home in Cincinnati, primetime, I will go with the Bengals to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Sirianni, they asked him what he does here. He said, I'm not sure. Zach Taylor at least has a job as a head coach.
That is very true. So at that point, they're what, 5-3?
Yep.
5-3. Okay, well, the next stretch can be a little tough. They go in at home to host the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I definitely think they beat the Raiders at home. I think the Raiders story is going to be good. I think they're going to be a gritty team next year. However, don't think they're going to be on the same level as the Bengals as far as quarterback play. I will take the Bengals at home to go 6-3.
All right, and then they have a short week there. Thursday Night Football the following week in Baltimore to take on the Ravens.
Yeah, so I picked them to split with the Ravens, so I have them winning that game versus Baltimore, move to 7-3.
All right, and then the next week with some extended time, they face the Chargers in LA.
Yeah, Bengals definitely winning that game versus the Chargers. I'm not sure what the Chargers are going to be next year, but I don't think it's going to be great as a team, so I will go with Joe Burrow winning in LA.
All right, and then the next week they have a bye. Chances are they're going to win that game.
Maybe it's a tie.
Maybe it's a tie, potentially. After their week off, they are at home to host the Steelers.
At home to face the Steelers. I will take the Bengals to beat the Steelers in that game and move to 9-3.
All right, and then this will be a game that you'll appreciate. Monday Night Football in Jerry World.
Monday Night Football in Jerry World. Yeah. Problem with the Cowboys is Deuce Vaughn is their best running back there. And I will take the Cincinnati Bengals to go to Jerry World and win.
All right. So then, after winning some big games against some big opponents, they will be in Tennessee for an average 1 o'clock game against the Titans.
Yeah, so going through a bunch of weeks where they won a lot of tough games there. They're currently sitting at 10-3. For some reason, I just think that's a game where they're going to lose. And I think there's another loss in here, whether it be to the Titans or the Raiders. So I actually have them losing that game and go to 10-4.
All right. And then just a few days later, they host the Cleveland Browns, a team that has given them issues in the past, for Thursday Night Football on a short week.
Yeah, I think the Browns are pretty banged up by that point. Deshaun Watson's probably hurt again. It's probably Jameis Winston at quarterback. And we're into November at this point where the Bengals start to December at this point. So the Bengals are typically undefeated there. So I will take the Bengals to win and go to 11-4.
All right. And then they have to struggle on Sunday, a couple last legs of the season, week 17. They got to defeat, whether it be Zach Wilson, Bo Nix, or whoever else is quarterback at that time for the lowly Denver Broncos.
Yeah, that's a game where if you lose it at that point, you're not winning a Super Bowl or getting to the playoffs.
Absolutely not. And then by then, week 18, potentially they're resting starters. Who knows where they're at that point. Going to Pittsburgh for a game that probably means more for the Steelers in week 18.
Yeah, so I'll pick the Bengals to win that game in Pittsburgh there, whether it be Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Steelers are going through a pretty brutal stretch at that point. They're going to be beat up. So I'll have the Bengals finishing at 13-4.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think I'd probably have them around that 12-5, 13-4 range. But they're looking pretty good at that point.
Yeah, looking pretty good at that point. So Bengals right now we have at 13-4. Do you agree with that? Do you think they're a little lower, a little higher?
Yeah, I think 11-6 to 13-4 is the range that I would have. I have them probably around 12-5. I think they would lose that last week Steelers game. But otherwise, I think I agree with most of what you're saying.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to the next team in that division, and we can go to the Cleveland Browns here.
Okay. One last thing I'll say about the Bengals is we mentioned how they've struggled the first 6 weeks of the season. Is it just me, or is those first 6 games kind of a layup? I mean, you face the Patriots, Commanders, and Panthers all in that stretch. I feel like the NFL gods are trying to reward them a little bit.
Yeah, the NFL gods are trying to do them a favor, but they're also trying to do the Kansas City Chiefs a favor, a team that's historically struggled against the Bengals in the regular season by giving them the Bengals in week 2 when they know the Bengals are not going to be at their best.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think that they've gotten some blessings there.
Okay.
So Cleveland Browns, this is a team that I do think they're going to be a solid team. They're going to be a tough out, but I also think their offense will struggle. So let's see how they fare.
Yeah, so Cleveland Browns start out the season at home. 4 o'clock game versus the Dallas Cowboys, and this will be Tom Brady's first NFL game.
Yeah, and I think that this is a game where, unfortunately, the Cowboys beat up on that lowly offense. I think the Cowboys do win that game. Cowboys always start hot, and I think that, unfortunately, this is a game the Browns will struggle in.
Okay, so you have the Browns going 0-1 to start the season there. And then after that, they make their way down to Meyerville in Jacksonville to face the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence.
I think that this is a game that the Jaguars will win. I'm not super high on the Jaguars this year, but again, I think Cleveland's struggling to find their identity. How good will Nick Chubb be? I think it's going to take him a while to get going. So I have the Jaguars winning that early game.
Okay, so starting out 0-2, and then thankfully the next week they're facing off against the Giants and Walt Jr. In Cleveland at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, well, I don't care how much money, whether it's 160, 1.6 billion, I don't care. I don't think they win that game. That being the Giants, I think the Browns win that game. I think their defense alone could win that, but I think by then you're starting to see Nick Chubb get into rhythm again and that offense starting to thrive.
Perfect. And then after that, we have the Browns making their way to Vegas to play the Raiders at 4:25.
Yep, and I think they beat the Raiders there. They go to 2-2 at this point, starting to get their rhythm, and I think that they can beat the Raiders there.
Perfect. And then after that, get another break here. They go on the road again to the Washington Commanders at 1 o'clock.
Yep, and I do think they win that game as well. They're looking hot, winning 3 straight games after starting 2-0.
Okay, so now they are 3-2, making their way to Philadelphia. 3 straight games on the road. Definitely a tough situation for any NFL team.
Yeah, and that's where I think that the Eagles will take that win there, kind of knocking them back down to earth. I know they have a tough stretch ahead of them following this.
All right, so that is 3-3 now for the Cleveland Browns, and then facing off against the Cincinnati Bengals at 1 o'clock here.
At 1 o'clock. I think they're going to probably split with the Bengals here. I think that this being earlier in the season, I'll take them to beat the Bengals.
Okay. Yeah, in previous video, I had the Browns winning this game as well when we did our Bengals preview. Make sure you check that one out. And then after that, they are at home again versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep, and I think the Ravens are going to win that game there. I have a feeling the Ravens might sweep them just because I feel like they know them pretty well. So I'll take them to lose.
All right, and then they host the Chargers at home the very next week in November at 1 o'clock. Starting to get a little chilly then.
Starting to get a little chilly. I'm actually going to take the Chargers to win this game. I think that by then, I believe Jim Harbaugh is going to have a good game plan for him. By then, we don't know whether it's going to be DTR. We don't know whether it's going to be Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston, and I think the Chargers can handle it.
Okay, so you have the Chargers winning that game, bumps them to 4-5 there, and then they host the Baltimore Ravens. Or no, they go to New Orleans to face the Saints.
That's a game I think that it's going to be an absolute battle there. Tough, gritty game, but I have the Browns prevailing. I just don't believe in the Saints whatsoever.
All right, so still at 500, at 5-5, and then they go back to Cleveland to host the Steelers.
Steelers give them a lot of trouble historically. I do think this is probably something where they split, but it's the dog pound, so I'm going to give them to beat the Steelers.
Okay, and that is on Thursday Night Football as well. So at home on a short week, beat the Steelers to move to 6-5. Playoff hopes are still there, and then at home they face the Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, no, I can't. I can't do that. Sorry.
All right, then they move to 6-6, and then after that they face the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati.
And I'm going to pick Cincy to win that game. They're starting to take their lumps at this point.
All right, so Browns at 6-7, and then they're at home versus the Miami Dolphins. Looks like December 29th.
Yep, December 29th. I'm going to have the Dolphins winning that game. It's going to be a tough one, but I do think that Tyreek Hill can get it done.
Yeah, and the Browns will also have a losing record at that point, so it plays right into the Dolphins' hands there. And then to be determined versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep, and I think that depends on where they are. I think the Browns by then they're looking at like 7-8, 7-9, whatever it might be, and ultimately they're probably going to be facing Tyler Huntley by then. But I do think the Ravens win.
Do you think the Ravens win? Okay, so that puts the Browns at 6-11.
6-11. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I had. I think 7-10, 6-11. That's kind of the range I have. It's not that I don't believe in Kevin Stefanski. It's not that I don't believe in that defense, but at the same time, I just don't see how every team's going to have a winning record. Maybe it's them. Maybe it's the Steelers that have that losing record, but I think Cleveland has the best opportunity for them not to repeat their success from last year.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty fair there. 6-8, 6-11 for the Cleveland Browns. Probably at the bottom of the division there. So we can go ahead and then we've done the Bengals, done the Browns here. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team that every single year has had a winning record under Mike Tomlin. Had the awfulness of Kenny Pickett there. Wasn't really able to, throw touchdowns, which is the number one responsibility of a quarterback there. Didn't like the idea of competition, which is a massive red flag there. So now they're running it with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields there. So definitely a bit of a weird year for the Steelers. However, did acquire Patrick Queen, which will be a big addition for their defense there. So excited to see the Steelers here and get into their schedule.
Yeah, so they start the season at 1 o'clock against Kirk Cousins and the Falcons.
At 1 o'clock versus Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. I'll go with the Steelers to win that game versus the Falcons. Falcons going to take a little bit to get used to Kirk Cousins, especially with a little bit of rockiness to start there. And I think that's a game TJ Watt can win on his own.
Absolutely. Well, then they have to face the great golfer that is Bo Nix in the Denver Broncos at the Mile High.
Yeah, we don't know if it's going to be Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, or Jared Stidham there. So I will take the Steelers to win that game in Mile High and move to 2-0.
All right. And then they face they host the LA Chargers at 1 o'clock. Week 3.
Yeah, I will take them to beat the Chargers in that game. I think the Chargers are going to take a while to actually have some continuity on offense. Not really a big believer in their offensive weapons right now, especially with Quentin Johnson still being at wide receiver there. So I'll take the Steelers.
All right. And then starts to get a little bit tougher there. They go to Indianapolis to face the Colts, now 3-0.
Yeah, I'll take the Indianapolis Colts to win that game, bump the Steelers to 3-1.
All right. And then the very next week on Sunday night, host the Dallas Cowboys for the battle of the old NFL.
Yeah, they host the Dallas Cowboys there, and I don't see the Cowboys having enough offense to really score on the Steelers. And one problem for the Cowboys is that the Steelers are going to have a winning record at that point. Doesn't really play into the formula for the Cowboys of winning games versus all of these losing teams here. So I will have Pittsburgh winning.
All right. So at that point, they're riding pretty high. They might even be number 1 in the division at that point. And then 4 o'clock the following week, they go and face the Raiders in Vegas.
I will take the Raiders to win that game. I think it's going to be a tough game on the road, even though it's pretty much going to be a home game for the Steelers with all the fans and how they travel there. I think a tough game on the road versus Antonio Pierce. It's just a game that the Steelers typically lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the very next week, they have a primetime game on Sunday night against Aaron Rodgers and the East Rutherford Jets.
I will take the Pittsburgh Steelers to win that game.
Okay, interesting. All right. And then back-to-back primetime games. The following week, Monday Night Football hosting Bobby Okereke and the New York Giants on Monday night.
Yeah, I think any team that loses to Walt Jr. should not be a legitimate Super Bowl contender or a legitimate NFL team and should maybe be banished to Canada. So I'll take the Steelers to win that game.
All right. And then following that, they do have a bit of a rest following it. And then they face the Commanders in Washington on Sunday.
Yeah, so you should be able to beat that game. Jaden Daniels, still a young quarterback, still a new head coach. Not a huge believer in the Commanders this year, so I'll take the Steelers to win.
All right. And then their schedule does get tough to end the season. Pretty brutal. They start by hosting the Ravens for Sunday.
Yeah, so I'll take the Baltimore Ravens to win that game in Pittsburgh.
All right. And then short week turnaround. They faced Kevin Stefanski-led Cleveland Browns on Thursday night the following week.
Yeah, I believe that was in Cleveland, and we both picked the Browns to win that game, so I'll say that they lose there.
All right. And then they go to Cincinnati to face the Steelers the following week.
Yeah, so the Steelers go to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. I will take the Bengals in that game, and bump the Steelers to 7-5.
All right. And now at that point, they've lost 3 straight games. They host the Cleveland Browns at 1 o'clock.
At 1 o'clock. I do think that they split with Cleveland, so I'll pick them to win that game and move to 8-5.
All right. And then the next 3 games, pretty brutal. Sunday at 4:25, the Eagles, they have to go and face.
Yeah, so if it's in Philadelphia, I'm going to take the Eagles to win that game.
For the Battle of Pennsylvania. And then the very next week, Saturday, they face the Baltimore Ravens at 4:30.
Yeah, so I'll take the Ravens to win that game because they're not going to be facing all of the backups.
Yeah, not yet at that point. And then they have Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, Christmas game on Netflix against the 2-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, so I will take the Kansas City Chiefs to win that game there as well.
So then at that point, they're chilling at 8-8. The battle of will Mike Tomlin maintain his winning season? Well, last game of the season, yet to be determined the time. They'll be facing the Cincinnati Bengals.
They'll be facing the Cincinnati Bengals. I picked the Bengals to win that game when I previewed that, so I'll have the Steelers at 8-9.
Wow. Okay. Potentially a losing season in the works for the Steelers.
Yeah, losing season in the works there. So currently, as it stands, the Bengals are 13-4, the Browns are 6-11, and the Steelers are 8-9. Let's see how the Ravens do.
Ravens, yeah. And my expectations for the Ravens, I think that their offense will be better. I think their defense could potentially take a small step back, but I do think that they should be contending for the 1 seed and that division. Whether they'll be 13-4 or not, I have them anywhere between 11-6 and 13-4. So we'll see how they fare as we face the Ravens.
Okay. And then so the Ravens here in their first week, opening day on Thursday night, they'll be going to Arrowhead versus the Kansas City Chiefs that they look clueless against in the conference finals.
Well, Lamar Jackson is 1-4 against Patrick Mahomes all time, with the only game being that infamous Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumble game. Friends of the show know how that went. But other than that, we saw them against Kansas City in the conference finals. Lamar is afraid to face Patrick Mahomes. That is his words, not mine. So I take the Chiefs.
Okay. So starting 0-1 there, then they go back home to face the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yep. And I do think that they win this game. I don't see them falling to 0-2. As much as I like Gardner Minshew, I think that defense will be tough.
Okay. Then after that, we have the Ravens in Dallas to take on the Cowboys there.
Yeah, they should beat the Cowboys. I think they have the better offense. Can the Cowboys stop Derrick Henry? That's the question to be answered, or Lamar Jackson. And it's a primetime game, so I'll take the Ravens.
Okay. Then after that, we have the Ravens hosting Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills kind of lost their entire team this year, and this is on Sunday Night Football.
Sunday Night Football. I do think that Josh Allen will have a decent game because he does perform on primetime, but I think the Ravens are the better team, and Lamar Jackson also shows out, so I think they win that game.
Perfect. And then after that, we have the Ravens going to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. Believe we had the Ravens winning this game before in our Bengals preview.
Yep, so we'll continue on with the magic there. I think that they, after falling to the Chiefs, go on a bit of a roll.
Yeah, so now they're 4-1, and then they face off
Commanders, I believe.
Yeah, they face off at home versus the Commanders.
Yeah, I don't see many wins on the calendar for the Commanders. When we preview the NFC East, you'll see that there. They win this game against the Commanders.
Okay, so that puts them at 5-1 currently as it stands. Then they go on the road to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football.
You know, I feel like there's a loss brewing in the works for the Ravens. I don't think it's against the Bucs, but I do think that within the next few weeks, I see them losing a game. Tampa Bay plays them hard, but I do think the Ravens prevail.
Okay. And then, yeah, don't see too many other losses on the calendar here because then they go to Cleveland after Monday Night Football to face the Browns.
Yep, and I believe in my Browns preview, I had the Ravens winning, so I'll continue on there.
All right, Ravens still hot at 7-1 here. And then they go at home. They face Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos.
Look, I know Sean Payton's a big Bo Nix guy. I am not. I have the Ravens winning. I think we're in for a bad Broncos season. Thank God that Denver has the Nuggets.
All right, and then after this, they face the Cincinnati Bengals at home. We had the Bengals winning this game in our Bengals preview. So that would have the Ravens dropping to 8-2 here.
Yep, I do think that keeping that continuity. By then, the Bengals on a roll. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I'll take the Bengals there.
Okay, and then after that, they go to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers.
Is this a Thursday night game?
Yeah, so the Bengals and Ravens was the Thursday night game, and then this one is a Sunday game at 1 o'clock.
Okay, and you had the Ravens winning this game, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
sweeping the Steelers.
Okay, so we'll continue with that continuity there. Ravens winning that game, continuing their magic there.
9-2, and then they go on the road to face your beloved Chargers.
Yep. At this point, they're 9-2. This is a game I do see that I see them losing a game they probably shouldn't. And I think this is a game that they could have that with the Harbaughs, the battle of the Harbaughs. I will take Jim Harbaugh to get some revenge against the Ravens, and beating the Ravens there.
Okay, so Chargers catch the Ravens asleep at the wheel in that game, and then the Ravens go back home to face the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep, and I do think that they beat the Eagles here, continuing their magic. They're definitely a losable game, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, beating the Eagles.
Okay, so now they're 10-3, and then they go to face Walt Jr. and the Giants in New Jersey.
Yep, unless if they really fall asleep or they're banged up with injuries, I don't see how they lose that game, beating Walt Jr. and the rest of the gang there in East Rutherford.
All right, so it puts them at 10-3, neck and neck with the Bengals here for the division, and then they faced the Steelers at home. Had the Steelers losing that game in our Steelers preview, so the Ravens move to 11-3.
Yep, I think they win that game.
And then they go to Houston to face CJ Stroud and the Texans.
Yep, and I will have the Texans winning that game. I think that the Texans are the better team. I think they ultimately will be the 1 seed. Texans whisper speaking it into existence, so they win that game.
All right, so that puts them at 12-3, facing off the Cleveland Browns, and we had the Browns losing that game, and the Ravens are playing for the division in that game. Yeah, so no, it puts them at
That would be 12-4, right?
12-4. Yeah, they would finish 13-4, tied with the Bengals.
Yep, and the Bengals would have the tiebreaker, putting them in that division lead. I think if I were to go back and adjust anything, I think maybe that Eagles game is a vulnerable game for them. And then if not, there's another game in there that they potentially lose. I think the Ravens ultimately will be 12-5. And I think the Bengals will win that division. So not much I would change, but I think that there's probably a loss in there that I missed. Also, maybe that Eagles game. But
Yeah, maybe
overall.
a Steelers game that we missed there, because the Steelers sometimes find a way. I would swap the Eagles in the Chargers game, though, personally.
I think the Chargers are going to be better than we think, but I don't think they're going to be a playoff team potentially. I think 8-9 is what I expect the Chargers to be. But Battle of the Harbaughs, I can see that being a game the Chargers win.
Okay, yeah, I just don't personally see enough offense for the Chargers, but we have the Bengals at 13-4, the Browns at 6-11, the Steelers at 8-9, and the Ravens at 12-5.
12-5. That's what we like to see.
So that would be Bengals, Ravens, Steelers, and Browns there.
Sounds about right.
Pretty solid preview there. And then we shift over to the NFC and what might be the best division in the league this year. We have 4 really young teams. We have 4 young head coaches here trying to make their mark here. We have Caleb Williams stepping into the fold here, taking on one of the easiest schedules. And then we have the Lions trying to maintain everything they accomplished and take the next step and get to the Super Bowl. We have the Packers breathing down the Lions' neck. And then we have the Vikings with B-Flow coaching the defense, had some really good draft picks, and they have Aaron Jones on that team. Still have TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, and a whole lot of talent. Really, the downfall of them might be just having Sam Darnold on that roster. Didn't really work out for the Niners when they had him on the roster. But overall thoughts on the AFC or the NFC North?
Yeah. See, this is probably the best division of football currently, just because of the ceiling of all 3 of these teams. I think the Lions, great story. We saw them last year, 12-5, winning their first playoff game in 30 years. I think that they're still going to be a Super Bowl contender. However, I think the Bears have a good chance of winning this division just based on their strength of schedule. And I think the Packers are also a team that you can't really discount. So I think it's going to be a good series. I think that potentially we have the Bears winning that division, or even the Packers have a chance. But ultimately, 3 really solid teams that'll be battling it out. And then the Vikings, I just think due to the fact that they have some quarterback question marks, questions with their defense, I think ultimately we see them finishing last potentially.
All right. Well, let's start young and optimistic with the easiest schedule in that division being the Chicago Bears, and see where the Bears are going to be taking us. They have the luxury in Cole Kmet. They have Caleb Williams, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, and they still have DJ Moore on that team, and a stellar defense, which closed out the season very strong. When I say Chicago Bears, what else do you think about?
I think of Caleb Williams. I think of that trio with Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore. I think even their running backs with DeAndre Swift is going to be really good as well. So I think Chicago is going to be really good. I see them anywhere between that 10-7 and 11-6 range. So interested to see how this plays out.
All right. And you are picking the Bears and the Packers here. So we'll start week 1 at home in Chicago, facing off against the Titans.
I think that this is a game that the NFL wants to see the Bears win. I think Caleb Williams comes and shines in his debut, beating the Titans in this game, and cementing himself as the best Bears quarterback of all time.
All right. So Bears go ahead and beat the Titans there. Then they're on the road to face off against CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans on Sunday Night Football.
See, that's a tough game, tough turnaround. I think that the Texans win that game. Caleb Williams struggles.
All right. And then they're back-to-back games on the road going to Indianapolis to face the Colts.
Yep. And this is a game, I think this will be another tough game for them. They also face the Rams coming up. I think they're going to split with one of those 2 games. I'll take them to lose to the Colts.
Lose to the Colts. Okay, so they're 1-2, and then you said you have them splitting with the Rams, so they're back home in Chicago, so going to 2-2.
Yep, I do think they beat the Rams in the Sean McVay.
All right, and then the real test is they face off back-to-back home games of a 3-game homestand here versus the Carolina Kitty Cats.
No chance the Panthers win. I think that between Montez Sweat on one side and Cole Kmet on the other, that is all they need to beat that. They're Bears bigger than Panthers.
All right, and then we have the Chicago Bears going to London to face off against the dare I say, London Jaguars.
At this point, you might as well. I think that this is a losable game. I don't trust the Jaguars. For some reason, Jacksonville is just good in these games, so I'm actually going to take the Jaguars to win this game, surprisingly.
All right, so 3-3, not too bad for a young team to start out here. And then we have them going to Washington as the schedule starts to ease up here.
Yep, and this is where I think the Commanders start. I think the Bears are going to start to win a lot of games. I take them beating the Commanders, and the next stretch of games are starting to look pretty good.
All right.
I think they start winning some games.
Then they go to Arizona.
And I think they win that game as well, beating up on Kyler and the boys in Arizona.
Then they face the Patriots at home.
Another win for the Bears. I don't trust the Patriots offense, whether they score maybe at all in this game.
Yeah, and then they're at home again, 3 games in a row versus the Green Bay Packers.
Yep, and I think that starting to switch the tides with the Packers, I do think that they're going to win this game. I think they'll most likely split with the Packers as we walk through it here.
Okay, and then they face the Vikings at home.
Yep, I think also potentially a team they split with. I'm going to take them to beat the Vikings in this stretch as they rattle off 5 straight wins.
All right, then they are in Detroit versus the Lions.
And this is where I think their luck runs out. Detroit beating them. Not sure if this is a primetime game or not, but I think Detroit does get the win.
Yeah, so it's Thanksgiving at 12:30 there, so that'll be a spectacle to see. And then we have the Bears going to San Francisco, maybe a beat-up San Francisco 49ers team.
Potentially there. I'm going to give Kyle Shanahan some respect. I'll have him beating the Bears. I just think, at this point, they've won 6 straight. They're riding high. I actually will have them beating the Lions on this Thanksgiving. So they're riding high. They've got 6 straight wins. The 49ers take them down.
49ers take them down. Okay, so they are 9-4. Hopefully that game doesn't go to overtime and Kyle Shanahan knows the rules in that one. And then they go to the Vikings.
Yep, and I said they were going to split with the Vikings. I think the Vikings win this game and beat them there. But at this point, they're, 9-5?
Yep, so they're 9-5 here. And then you said you had them beating Detroit on Thanksgiving, and then they're at home versus the Detroit Lions.
Yep, and this is where I think the Lions get the win, starting to trail off at the end, but I do think they'll turn things around potentially.
Okay, so that puts them at 9-6, and then they are at home versus the Seahawks.
Yep, and I'm going to take them to beat the Seahawks there, getting to 10-6. I think they just have the better team all around.
Then closing it out versus the Packers.
Yep, and they beat the Packers the first time around, so I'll actually have them losing to the Packers to end the season. I think the Packers could be potentially booking a playoff spot by this point.
All right, so 10-7 for the Chicago Bears. Not bad. Right on par with expectations. I would have them in the 9-11 win range there, no pun intended.
Yeah, I just think when they start facing the Cardinals and Patriots and Panthers and all these other teams, they're going to start to rattle off a lot of wins. And then towards the end of the season, really will be indicative of Caleb Williams' development, but then also the teams in that division, where they're at that point.
All right, so after that, let's shift to the Minnesota Vikings, where pretty much have a lot of question marks on defense here. You lose your best defensive player in Hunter, but you're able to hopefully replace him in the draft there. Still have Brian Flores on defense, but no Kirk Cousins. Have a lot of question marks at quarterback where you're able to kind of make it work for a little bit with Josh Dobbs. Then it ended up falling apart. You take J.J. McCarthy. Real question is going to be, are we going to see him right away, or is it going to be Sam Darnold? But they do still have a lot of weapons, so I think they'll still be a fun team to watch.
Yeah, I think that we'll go through their schedule here and see how it pans out. For me, I think that they'll be the lame duck in the division only because of the 3 teams ahead of them, but I still think they're going to be a tough out for any team.
Okay.
So they start the season 1:00, going all the way to East Rutherford to face Walter White Jr. in the New York Giants.
Yeah, so I will have them beating the New York Giants. Giants usually come out slow there. And if you lose to Walt Jr., you should fire your coach in week 1.
Absolutely. And then they host the 49ers the very next week.
I will have the San Francisco 49ers winning that game in Minnesota.
Yep. So kind of a tough stretch to start the season. They go and host the Texans the following week.
I'll have the Texans winning that one.
All right. And then division rivalry, they have to go to Lambeau to face Jordan Love and the Packers.
And then we had them splitting with the Packers there. Or
Yep. So I had that was with the Bears.
that was with the Bears. Yeah, I think the Packers beat the Vikings in both matchups here.
Okay. So Packers winning that game. So they lost 3 straight games. They go to London at 9:30 Eastern time, facing off against Aaron Rodgers.
Facing off against Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be playing. If it's Aaron, I'll go with the Jets.
All right. So they've lost a couple games. Season's looking pretty tough at this point. And then it doesn't get any better because they host the Lions the very next week.
Yeah, I'll go with the Lions to win that game as well.
All right. So at this point, they've lost a lot of games, and it's looking pretty tough for them. Doesn't get any better, though, because right after the Lions game, after having a bye between there, they face the Rams 4 days later on Thursday Night Football.
On Thursday Night Football, have to go with the Rams in that game. Matty Stafford still has the ice, Puka Nacua. I mean, Cooper Cup. What's not to like?
What's not to like? And then following that, they have a break in between, but then they face the Colts in Minnesota.
I'll go with the Colts to win that game.
Oof. So they are a tough stretch. By this point,
1-7.
1-7. They might finally be seeing JJ McCarthy don the helm, and they go to Jacksonville, and all 7,000 of their fans in that attendance going to Jacksonville, facing the Jaguars and Mac Jones.
That's a game I just think the Jags will lose for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm gonna pick the Vikings.
That is very appropriate, I would say. And then the very next week, they go to Tennessee to face Brian Callahan's led Tennessee Titans.
I think the Titans are going to be a dark horse team this year. So give me the Titans.
All right. Perfect. And then that next game is the Vikings and Bears.
Vikings and Bears. Give me the
Chicago.
Bears.
Yep, in Chicago. And then they host the Arizona Cardinals the very next week.
I will go with the Minnesota Vikings in that game.
Very fair, very fair. And then the next week, Kirk Cousins' revenge game potentially against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, Kirk's revenge. I don't know. I think it kind of falls flat. I don't think he's great with revenge or kind of storylines or pressure, so I will go with the Vikings in that one.
Appropriate there. And then Monday Night Football, we get at home Minnesota hosting Caleb Williams-led Bears.
I'll go with the Bears in that one.
All right. Where are they looking at this point? They've got 3 games left.
They are 4-10.
Tough stretch here. Well, they go to Seattle the next week to face Sam Howell and the Seahawks.
I'll go with the Vikings. Give me the Vikings in that one.
All right. Season's starting to look a little better.
Yeah, 5-10. So much better.
So much better. 5-10. And then they host the Packers in the playoff stretch for Jordan Love and the Packers.
Yeah, I'll go with the Packers in that one.
All right. And then they end the season potentially with a rested Lions team in Detroit.
And I will go with Detroit in that game and put the the Vikings at 5-12.
Tough stretch for the boys in purple there.
Yeah, do you think Justin Jefferson's like, hey, trade me at this point in the middle of the season? I think Justin Jefferson could get traded this year.
I think it's definitely possible. I think there's plenty of teams that would take his services. So it remains to be seen what we will see. But I think it's definitely possible.
All right. And then after that, we have the Green Bay Packers here. When I say Packers, what do you think about?
I think if we did the AFC North just a few minutes ago. I think this team reminds me of a better version of the Steelers. They have Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love's going to continue to get better. Their defense is still pretty middle of the road, but I think that they're capable of being a 10-7 team. So I think that's kind of where I have them.
Okay. Perfect. And then they start the season in Philadelphia versus the Eagles.
I'm going to have them losing to the Eagles. I think first week of the season, maybe some nerves there, but they'll start to get their rhythm.
Okay. And then they host the Indianapolis Colts.
And I'm going to have them beating the Colts there. I think that they will get the win there.
And then they go to Tennessee and face off against the Titans.
See, I think this is a game that maybe they might be favorites in, but I do think the Titans are going to be a tough out. So I think this is a game that they can lose, and I'll take the Titans to win this game.
All right, so starting out 1-2, and then they face off against the Minnesota Vikings at home. I had the Packers sweeping the Vikings in our Vikings preview there.
Yep, and I think that they're going to sweep the Vikings as well. So I will continue with that narrative and beating the Vikings.
All right, so not bad, looking pretty good at 2-2 here, and then they go to LA to face the Rams and the high flying offense.
That high flying offense, that could be potentially a tough game. I think if it was later in the season, I would go Packers, but I'm going to pick Sean McVay to outcoach Matt LaFleur.
Okay, Coach Eyebrows getting outcoached there. He's currently 2-3, and then he goes back home versus the Arizona Cardinals.
And I do think they beat the Cardinals there. As much as we love Mel Murr from Impractical Jokers, don't think that they can overcome the Packers.
All right, and then they host the Houston Texans.
Texans are going to be really good. I think they could potentially be the best team in the league, and I think that they take care of the Packers, even though they are at Lambeau.
Okay, so they are currently 3-4, and then they take their talents to Jacksonville.
Yep, and I do think that they beat the Trevor Lawrence's beloved Jaguars there. In Jacksonville, potentially 3 or 4 people getting to bear witness to this game.
Yeah, 3 or 4 people will be there in Jacksonville with all the senior citizens in that city there. And then we have the Lions and the Packers.
I think the Lions and Packers are probably going to split. Because of where the Packers are at this point, I will take the Lions to get the win. I think later in the season is when the Packers get their revenge.
Okay, so currently starting out 4-5, then they take their talents to Chicago to face the Bears.
And I believe I had the Packers winning, if I remember correctly. I think they will split with the Bears as well, so I'm going to pick them to beat the Bears.
All right, and then the Packers facing off against the San Francisco 49ers at home.
I do think that this is a game the Packers win. I'll take them to beat the 49ers and getting revenge.
Okay, so we are currently 6-5 right now for the Packers. Not bad, not bad. And then they face the Miami Dolphins at home. Dolphins can't really beat a team with a winning record.
I was going to say 6-5. I believe that's a above 500 record. So due to that knowledge there and, Tua's record against winning teams, the inevitable happens. Packers beat the Dolphins.
All right, so now we're picking it up 7-5 here in Detroit, facing off against the Lions.
And this is where I do think the Lions get their revenge. I had the Lions beating them the other time around, so I think that they get their revenge against the Lions as they start to heat up towards the end of the season.
All right, so Packers are now 8-5, kind of following a similar trend of last season. And then they go to Seattle to face Sam Howell and the Seahawks.
They should, keyword should, beat the Seahawks there.
All right, and then after that, they face off against the Saints.
I think that there's a loss within the next 3 games. So I actually have them losing against the Saints in a game that they should have won, but somehow the Saints make it happen. Right now they're what, 10-4?
Yeah, so if they lose to the Saints, they would be 9-6.
9-6. Okay, I'll take them winning against the Saints, and then down the road I think they'll lose a game.
Okay, and they face the Vikings after that.
And I do think they beat them there.
Okay, so then they would be 11-5, and then they face against the Chicago Bears. Maybe that's their loss there.
Yep, and that's where I think they lose. I think Chicago gets the win.
Okay, so that would bring the Packers to 11-6, the Bears at 10-7, and the Vikings at 5-12. So that would make sense that Packers still slightly one game above the Bears there.
I think that's completely appropriate given the new regime in Chicago, and then the Packers continuing their continuity.
Okay, and then last but not least, we have Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions.
Absolutely. So you'll be picking these games here. Overall sentiment about the Lions. Do we expect them to continue where they left off? Maybe take a small step back potentially?
Yeah, expect them to continue where they left off. They still have not had a healthy Jameson Williams for the entirety of the season here. And then Sam Laporta. Tight ends typically only get better from their rookie year. Typically it takes them 2 or 3 years for them to hit their peak. And then they also address the corner position. So I do think that their defense is going to be better here and another draft. And they really have not missed on too many draft picks under Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. So I expect them to pick up where they left off and continue terrorizing the NFL.
Absolutely. Well, they have a great Sunday night matchup, week 1 against the pesky LA Rams in that infamous trade there.
Yeah, they heard all the noise about how the Rams should have beat them there. So I think Dan Campbell pulls up all that bulletin board material. They come out with grit. They come out flying. They come out biting kneecaps and beat the Rams.
Perfect. And then the very next week, they have another game that they placed against. They have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that they host at home.
Yeah, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got a little bit worse this offseason. And I think the Lions are just a good matchup. I think Jared Goff continues to torch.
Absolutely. And then they go to Arizona, game that I might potentially be at, and face the Cardinals.
I will take the Lions to go out there and beat the Cardinals there. Just don't think the Cardinals will be where they want to be yet there with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray. Lions are just a better team.
Absolutely. And then they stay in the West, and they face the Seahawks on Monday Night Football.
I have a joke. Seattle Seahawks.
That's a good one. But and I think they beat the Seahawks as well. And then, potentially, a good rematch there. 4:00 game. The game that was stolen from them last year, they go to Jerry World and face the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think they go to Jerry World and not only beat the Cowboys, annihilate them.
I love it. I'm here for it.
And also at this point, they still have a winning record. Cowboys typically struggle against good teams, so another reason why they'll win.
Absolutely. And then facing off against the Vikings team that gets kind of bullied by their division. They're in Minnesota at 1:00 on a Sunday.
Yeah, I believe they win that game as well here. In the Vikings preview, I had the Vikings losing that game, so we'll stay with that.
Absolutely. So they are undefeated. They have
6-0.
They have not lost to this point. Well, they host Tennessee the following week at 1:00.
They host Tennessee the following week. I think that's where they could have a little bit of a stumble. Tennessee maybe comes in with a surprise there. They lose a game that they shouldn't, and then they fall to 6-1.
All right. And then the very next week, 4:00 game, they go to Lambeau. I had them winning in this game down that stretch there.
All right. So they are 7-1 now.
All right. And then Sunday Night Football the very next week, they face the Texans in Houston.
In Houston, tough matchup there, but I will go with the Houston Texans at home to win that game.
All right. So started off really hot, lost the last 2 of the last 3. Well, luckily for them, the very next week, they face off against another cat in the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I will have them beating the Jacksonville Jaguars in that game.
All right. And then they go to Indy facing off against AR-15 in the Colts on 1:00.
Yeah, I'll have them beating the Colts as well.
All right.
Moving to 9-3, I believe.
Yep, you had their losing against the Texans and the Titans. So I think they're 9-2 at this point.
9-2. Perfect.
All right. And then 4 days later, after facing the Colts, they have to face Caleb Williams, and we know they have lost the last 6 Thanksgiving games. Can they remove that voodoo and beat the Lions on Thanksgiving?
I think they have to.
Surely, right? You would assume, right?
So they move to 10-2.
Yep. And then back-to-back Thursday night games, this time not on Thanksgiving, against the Packers.
Against the Packers, we had the Packers winning the second one, just like last year when the Packers beat them on Thanksgiving there. So I'll have the Packers still winning that one as well. They move to 10-3.
All right. And then the very next week, 4:00 game, facing your beloved Buffalo Bills.
My beloved Buffalo Bills, yeah. I think they win that game pretty handedly.
All right. Understandable there. And then 1:00 game, last few weeks of the season, facing off against Caleb Williams.
Against Caleb Williams, I do think they split with the Bears, so I'll have them losing that game.
All right. And this is at Soldier Field as well, so that fits that narrative. And then Monday Night Football, Week 17, against the San Francisco 49ers, potential playoff matchup.
Yeah, playoff rematch. Lions looking for revenge. The last wrong they had to right was for Dan Campbell is winning a Super Bowl and avenging all those Thanksgiving losses there. So I think they avenge the Thanksgiving loss and also avenge their conference championship loss as well.
Beautiful. And then they end the season potentially resting starters potentially in Detroit, facing off against the Vikings, who are at this point just 5-11 by then.
I will still have them beating the Vikings in that game, and moving to 13-4.
13-4. So better than last year. This would be the best Detroit Lions record of all time.
They should have been 13-4 last year, and I think that'll be the motivation this year.
Absolutely. So we previewed all these games. So we have the Lions winning that division, potentially being the 1 seed in the NFC, followed by the Packers and Bears. Anything that you would change at all, or does this sound about right?
Yeah, this all sounds right. I mean, I think all three of these teams will make the playoffs in the Packers, Bears, and Lions there. So yeah, I think this is pretty solid, and we'll see how our playoff standings shape out over the next few weeks as we preview these schedules. But most importantly,
stay brick.